Good morning, everybody. I'm Bob Von Harris. This is Matt Von Waldman next to me. We're a new tag team wrestling duo that you're just going to love. But first, we're going to do the Feel It or Fuck It podcast. The claws. The claws come out. All right, enough of the nonsense. Let's do a Feel It or Fuck It. Good morning, Matt. How are you, everybody? As you well know, the Rookie Scouting Portfolio Post-Draft Edition is available to you now. If you're a happy subscriber already, you already have it. You're very happy. If not, Matt, tell them the rundown.
Yeah, you can go to mattwaldman.com. You're going to get yourself a cheat sheet that's about 2-3 pages in length that covers 250 players. You're probably not going to need nearly that many at those skill positions, but it's tiered. You also get a sweet spot value that gives you the difference between where I've ranked them and what the ADP is based on 10 drafts that I monitored. And I show you those 10 drafts with links so that if you want to continue to track those drafts in the sheet, you can do so or make a sheet of your own. But most of them were finished. You get good fit, bad fit, players where I think are, that I think you should be keeping an eye on at the end of drafts, in the expanded free agent period, and a strategy that I think would be worthwhile for people to consider this year. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, probably today.
Yes, today for sure. And go to mattwaldman.com. Order up now if you don't have your pre-draft rookie scouting portfolio. You will want that as well as the post-draft. So go there, buy now. Eminently affordable and more than worth the cost. So said Bob Von Harris. Let's dive in here. So we both fire trades, by the way, also at Football Guys. My fantasy notebook is out this week. I did a little bit of a dive into the Chicago Bears, given the new play caller there, Ben Johnson. Very exciting. Comes from Detroit. They had a super high-end offense, but I think it's also exciting for some of the pieces around. It's easy to get caught up in just the upside, so let's ask for a dose of reality here. Kaleb Williams, is he a potential league-winning value as quarterback 8?
I think
that's where he's going at best balls right now, by the way. These are all the values I'm going to throw out are current best ball values on Underdog.
Yeah, I think potentially that's the case. You look at what happened last year. And when Thomas Brown just performed triage on that offense where all he did was let's put DJ Moore back in a position that's worthwhile for him to play in. Let's where he's going to know the routes that he needs to run in terms of the depth. Let's give him a little bit more RPOs. Let's throw the ball earlier and do some of those things. Give the offensive line a little bit of a break so that Kaleb Williams doesn't get hammered in the first half of games. And when you saw them do that, well, Kaleb Williams went from being well outside, I think, the top 15 to being a top 5 quarterback towards the end of the season.
4 and 3 as you went through. There was the immediate first 2 games that Brown took over. I want to say weeks 12 and 13, the aftermath there. It was 24.9 points in week 12. 26.1 points in week 13. He had another 20-plus point game. So, we've seen the upside. There's an ideal offense. They added to the offensive line, got 3 pieces, rebuilt the interior, doing a little copycat of what the Carolina Panthers did for Bryce Young. I think it's easy to overstate the case, but skill-wise, have we forgotten what Kaleb Williams was coming into the league because he was sacked 68 times and pressured 10,000 more, and yes, I'm exaggerating.
Absolutely, and
under pressure.
And since most NFL fans who play fantasy tend to give up by about week 7, week 8, they may no longer be watching what happens in the second half of the season. And if they did, you would have seen that Williams was, being hit less or at least getting sacked less and hit less in the first half. You saw him start to complete throws downfield that he wasn't quite hitting at the end of games because he was worn down and beaten up. So I honestly, you look at this, you look at Ben Johnson having a good offense, as you mentioned. They're going to be able to spread the field a lot, and there's going to be a lot of, difficult issues. They're going to create a lot of binds with Colston Loveland, Cole Kmet, Luther Burden, Odunze, and more. And then Swift out of the backfield or whoever else they bring into the mix. They're going to have this is going to be a team and an offense that's going to be able to get it done in the short range, but it's also going to be able to create in the intermediate and long range. There's going to be some big plays in this offense this year just from the improvement of the offensive line alone but adding 2 more weapons to the mix that are significantly talented, I think is a real positive.
Yeah, Joe Thuney, Jonah Jackson, they traded for both of those guys, as signed Drew Dalman away from the Falcons. So great moves there. I think that, some of the other things here, Ben Johnson's going to move him under center more. There's going to be more play action, more motion. So a lot of hope. Here's the issue, Matt Waldman. Here's the issue. The other quarterbacks going in that same range. You can get Baker Mayfield right a couple picks before him. Kyler Murray a couple picks after. Bo Nix in the same round. Justin Fields a round later. Do any of these guys interest you more?
Yeah, I mean, Baker Mayfield certainly could be on that mix, but I would say anything after what you mentioned after that, I would rather have Kaleb Williams, just because I think the weapons are better, and I think he's a more promising quarterback that's going to take another step this year. I'm not as concerned about having to learn another offense in as many years, because I actually think this is a good offense. I don't think he had an offense last year. So I think the structure that he's going to get is probably is going to be a welcome sign. And it's more or less that he's got similar weapons to work with, and I think everybody's going to have worked out some kinks with communication and how they execute. So, it might be a little slow in the beginning just because it is a new offense, but I don't think so slow that anything other than the most diehard Bears fans or overreactionary Kyle Brandts out there might, have some things to say that would, make a little tempest in the teapot that everybody will forget about 4 weeks later.
Fair enough. Is our wrestling coach, Hugo Von Barrelchest, causing trouble, Matt Waldman?
He is. He's trying to interfere from outside the ropes there, so I had to make sure that you weren't hit by a foreign object.
He's gnawing on Pat McAfee's leg.
Yeah, I think he is. I think he's in the back down there. So, we had to tell him to calm down because we were going to get a DQ.
Okay, so let's talk a little more about this offense. DeAndre Swift, I feel like, we all kind of decided, wow, it didn't end well in Detroit, or it ended quickly in Detroit. 1 year after Ben Johnson was there, DeAndre Swift had a serviceable season under him, but then they moved on from him. Now he's in Chicago, and you're thinking, wow, they don't really like him that much, and maybe they'll do something else. Well, they drafted your guy, Kyle Monaghan, out of Rutgers in the 7th round. Maybe he can have a role, but right now is DeAndre and J.K. Dobbins and Nick Chubb have been mentioned as potential additions at some point, right? This may become closer. Yeah. It's more complicated for Dobbins because he got the rare unrestricted tag from the Chargers. So whatever the case, running back 32 is the price you're paying for DeAndre Swift right now. That seems like a value.
It does. I think that at this stage, and if you're just doing best ball drafts and you're one of the people who are doing 8 million of these things, sure, get some shares in DeAndre Swift. Yeah.
I feel like that's an accusation.
It is an accusation, but we'll throw the book at you. But I think that just not the RSP. We don't want to kill you. And I don't think I can throw it.
We have to wrestle next week. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. We keep that under the ring just in case we need to pull it out, and knock somebody out with it. But Swift, I think Swift's a nice value right now. I just think you want to wait until July to really make him a centerpiece investment for August drafts, because I think by then, yes, you're going to have somebody else in there more or less, and they might eat into what Swift does. Swift's still going to probably have a role because I'll like what he does in the open field. And, if they the only concern I would have is if they bring in Jamal Williams and then they bring in J.K. Dobbins. And then you're looking at this and go, okay, we've got 2 guys who can catch out of the backfield. One's going to be the B back in Williams, and then you could see Swift being the A back and then taking over Dobbins being the A back for Swift. But if it's just Swift and Dobbins, then I would say you still probably have something at Swift that even if he turns into being like RB30, this year, and it's just disappointing, it's still, you still drafted him at the value that he's at.
What if, Matt, it's a Roschon Johnson and Monaghan and Swift?
Then he's an absolute steal there.
And what are the other 2?
What about the other 2? I think you're going to see a split probably, with Johnson probably having some short yardage value, because I could just see the Bears being kind of conservative and saying we know what Johnson is, we use him in short yardage, and then Monangai will have to prove himself. But I think Monangai is the type of player that has better vision than Johnson, is a little more versatile than Johnson as a runner, and might be the best decision maker of the backs we're mentioning here on the team. And if he does prove that he can catch the ball a little bit better, he might be the guy that is the surprise of that group. He's just not very explosive, and certain teams really value explosion out of their running backs. But I would say with Ben Johnson, certainly with Jamal Williams and David Montgomery, there's a role for the slower, savvier runner, and I think Monangai is that type of player.
All right, DJ Moore is going as wide receiver 18. Does that feel overpriced to you? Are we really comfortable with his role as the true lead receiver? Rome Odunze coming on. I know you like Luther Burden III. We don't want to get out in front of this. There'll be Colston Loveland there as well. Tight end, as you mentioned, is wide receiver 18 the right price?
I do think wide receiver 18 is the right price. Hold on for a minute. Mainly because if you look at how well I project Kaleb Williams to do, you're probably going to see at least 2, if not 3 players in that passing game deliver fantasy starter value. And I would say that Moore still has room to be higher than wide receiver 18. If you ask me, I think Moore could wind up being wide receiver 2 at wide receiver 18. And even if I like Luther Burden as that main option, maybe he comes in as a top 10 wide receiver. And then you have Colston Loveland or Rome Odunze kind of equaling a third really good fantasy option, but where maybe Odunze is wide receiver, 25 to 30, and Loveland is like tight end, somewhere between tight end 8 and tight end 14. You know what I mean? So I think that that's reasonable in this case, and Moore's going to get a lot of love. And if it turns in the Burden has a more limited role, and I'm wrong about that, then you're going to see DJ Moore probably between being one of the top 5 to top 10 receivers right now. So I mean, I think 18 is very reasonable for him. I lost you, Bob.
All right, fair enough.
There you go.
Christian McCaffrey coming off a 4-game season. 202 rushing yards, no touchdowns. Obviously not quite the force he was the year before when he averaged 24-plus points a game. He says he's fully healthy and ready to roll. People seem to believing in him. He has climbed up to running back 5 in the best ball world, and he's going at the tail end of the first round. You feeling that or fuck it?
Yeah, I'm feeling it because, I mean, if he's practicing without restriction right now, apparently that Achilles is not really that much of a problem. Obviously, with age, you know that cliff could come very fast. But, at this stage, why not? I would say, considering what he's done in his past, he's rebounded from injuries in the past that were difficult, and he's performed well. He's going to be the main cog in this offense. They got rid of Jordan Mason. And now you're looking at really Jordan James and Isaac Garendo to fill in. And you don't know who that exactly is going to be at this stage. So I would say, yeah, I mean, I would make the investment in McCaffrey. And you're not going to have to take him running back 1
right,
and by a large margin. So, sure.
Yeah, McCaffrey or Henry for you?
Henry.
Yeah. He's going after. He's going like a pick after him. I'm hoping I pick a little later, around a pick or 2 later, and land Henry. But like if I got caught with McCaffrey, I wouldn't feel bad. The rebound season seems entirely possible. I'm with you, and he is the centerpiece of that offense. We saw the year before the touches were off the charts. You wonder if they won't try to maybe manage him a little better this year. Even managing him a little better could still have massive workload. So another thing in that San Francisco offense, Brock Purdy, they're working on his contract. Is he a $50 million quarterback fielder, a year quarterback fielder bucket? Yeah,
because of the quarterbacks who make $50 million a year right now, you've got Prescott, Joe Burrow, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, and Jalen Hurts. And that $50 million club's going to probably become a $75 million club before you know it. So
Cap's going up.
Yeah, it continues. That's one constant as long as people continue to attend and watch football games and there's big TV deals. So when you look at it from that perspective, well, last year there were only 4 quarterbacks in the $50 million club who performed better than Brock Purdy as QB 13. I know that's not huge for everybody, but he was essentially a starting quarterback. And the year before, there were only 5. I believe. No, there were 5 last year that 5 that performed better than him last year, or this past year, excuse me. And in 2023, there were only 4, and he was a mid-level QB1. So it wasn't like, he performed poorly. And I mean, to me, you look at this list and I would say, yeah, I'd rather have Hurts. I'd rather have Jackson. You could debate Herbert based on the fact that it's a Jim Harbaugh offense and they've run the ball more, and he had some of his lowest production in terms of yardage that we've seen, even though some other efficiencies were there. Love, I'm not sure. I mean, Love you could make the debate about, but he didn't perform as well as Purdy over, in 2024. And Trevor Lawrence, hasn't really proven much.
Haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. So to me,
optimistic, but
to me, if you want to continue, Brock Purdy, you might look at it and go, I might have a chance at better, but odds are likely that 62% of the time, if I drafted a quarterback in the first round, I'm gonna fuck it up. And that's another 3 years down the drain, unless the Shanahans tend to move fast. But still, I think they're going to make that deal, and I think it's worthwhile. It's just not, I think that people still have the issue of that he was Mr. Irrelevant, and that he had a really strong team around him, but they don't know how to differentiate between the quarterback and the team, and I think he's played more than well.
At the rate Kyle Shanahan seems to have aged over the last 5 or 6 years, I think he's a one quarterback a change away from being 100 years old. So I hope he doesn't have to do that.
It's Palpatine. I think he's here
we go.
There we go.
Here we go. Mike Shanahan looking over the shoulder.
Yes.
All right. You mentioned Dak Prescott. He's finished as a quarterback 6 times as a pro every year that he's played 16 or 7, a full season. He's been quarterback 3 as recently as 2023. Being drafted as quarterback 18 in the 11th round. Can he outperform that number given the change of offensive coordinator and seems like a limited supporting cast?
Fuck yes, he can. You take him there just because he's proven it, multiple times, and that's just ridiculously low. It doesn't matter. We can nitpick all the different details about whether it will work out or whether it doesn't, but Dak Prescott is QB 18. That's just, if it doesn't work out, are you going to really be upset about that? I mean, unless you missed out on this year's Puka Nacua, but the odds of that happening are very low.
Are we saying the same thing? I mean, we're feeling the same about CeeDee Lamb. I mean, it's right now Jalen Tolbert and Cavante Turpin. Like, there's a two-edged sword. We want our wide receivers to get all the volume. We also like opposing defenses to be at least kept honest. CeeDee Lamb only slowed down when Dak Prescott slowed down last year. Is he like a guy that maybe you're looking at in the middle of that first round thinking, wow, I might get last year's wide receiver 1 and he might actually make good on that number?
Absolutely, because here's the thing. What makes receivers more valuable with other receivers in there to help out is when they play outside. Because if they're playing outside and they put the best press cover guy on them, and then they maybe have a safety playing over the top, and they're bracketing or they're double covering truly, and you don't really have anybody else who can catch the ball, and you don't have much respect for that offense, then yes, I would say that would be a bigger deal. But when you have a guy like Lamb who can play all three positions, they can move him around to generate opportunities. And last I remember, Jake Ferguson will be back. And I know that,
He will.
he may be the Brock Purdy of tight ends, but he is certainly a good enough player to be able to create. Yeah, it is a kind assessment maybe. But they'll be able to create a little bit more with him. And I think Cavante Turpin showed a little bit that there's room for growth with him, especially if he has a big play option in the slot. And we're looking at a second year for Tolbert. He might improve too. So, and if they don't, I mean, he's gonna get a ton of targets. It may not be as efficient, but it's gonna be productive.
I would agree with that as well. I feel that. Bear with me on this one. So. Because of Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson, it doesn't really matter who starts at quarterback in Minnesota. Feel it or fuck it.
Oh, fuck that. I don't want to make that statement. But I would say if the guy's being drafted after the top 14 quarterbacks, I would consider him late and just see what you have. I mean, that's to me, that's kind of the way that it goes. But if you're trying to really pinpoint, what top value is going to be. I mean, Sam Howell, you look at it, he can go deep. He's played well enough at Washington where at least you knew that he could provide production as long as there was an offensive line there, and he was getting battered and hammered. So I don't think it's going to be as good as Sam Darnold, but it'll be serviceable, I suppose.
I feel like it matters less to us than it does to the Vikings. I think it matters in the big picture, but just looking at Justin Jefferson's production over the course of many quarterbacks, as long as Kevin O'Connell's been calling the plays, things have worked out pretty well. I want to go back to Dallas. Javonte Williams. Will he end up being the Cowboys' lead back? Do you feel that, or fuck it?
I'm going to say fuck it. And mainly because I think Jaden Blue's going to have a chance. I think that that even Phil Maffa might have a chance to be in the mix in a committee situation. I think Williams will be in the committee, but I don't know if he'll necessarily end the year being the most productive running back in Dallas. Mainly because I think Blue offers more big playability. He's a really good pass catcher, and I think he's a smart runner. He just has to hold on to the ball. And then you don't like Jaden Blue? I think Jaden Blue ran past him and he wasn't very happy about that. But otherwise, I mean, you also have Phil Maffa, who can certainly run over people, and he's not a bad pass receiver in his own right. And to me, if Williams is a little bit slow getting the job done, Maffa could possibly squeeze in there. And then there's, I guess, Miles Sanders, who's semi-serviceable in that mix. But to me, it's Blue that's the big threat here. So Javonte Williams may start the lead back. I don't know if he's going to end being the lead back.
All right, fair enough. Let's go into some incoming players. Well, let's go with one guy. Let's get this out of the way. Kyle Pitts. Zach Robinson was talking about him this week, said there could be a big jump in production because he'll be more familiar with the offensive scheme. Matthew Fielder, fuck it.
I'm feeling it. I know lots of people don't like getting egg on their faces because they predict big things for a player, and then when it doesn't happen, they get disappointed and they sit there and bemoan all day on social media about how they're not going to get bitten twice by this guy, and they're tired of looking bad. And I don't mind looking bad for the right reasons. And I think that you look at Pitts, he is a capable player. He wasn't fully healthy last year. You saw issues with that. And with Michael Penix, I just think they match up well. Finally, I mean, when he had Matt Ryan, it was Matt Ryan at the end of his career. Matt Ryan was throwing him open on scheme types of plays, and they weren't using him as much in the vertical game where he could win the ball. And then you kind of had, the Arthur Smith era, and he decided, let's just roll with Jonnu Smith half the time, or at least give him a significant amount of touches, and we saw how that worked out. I think with Pitts, you can get a player who can win a lot on those boundary fades that Michael Penix just excels at. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Pitts gets to be kind of more of an outside weapon, a boundary weapon working inside out in the same way that Drake London does. Those will be the inside receivers a lot of the time, or they'll use Pitts on the outside just when they get him matched up on a corner. And I think that he could have a lot of success. I'm going to keep investing in him in that. He's kind of the Gene Bramwell's "I'm not quitting, I can't quit you, Mark Ingram" thing from over a decade and a half ago.
He's tight end 16 on best balls right now. You're getting him well into the double-digit rounds.
I'd still consider him at tight end 8.
It's essentially a free square play. Yeah. Like the guys going ahead of him. Dalton Kincaid, do I see more upside there?
Nope.
Jake Ferguson?
Nope.
David Njoku, maybe. Tucker Kraft? I don't know, maybe. I'm not as sold on Tucker Kraft with Musgrave likely back, so Colson Loveland's ahead of him. I mean, I think we get into the territory then Evan Ingram probably would rather have him, but you get the point. Like, you're down at tight end 16, you're throwing the dart, picking your guy. I can totally see why you want to bet
easily
on the talent.
Pitts.
Still a very young man, too, by the way. I think we should not overlook that. In New England, they've had difficulty evaluating wide receivers. Is Kyle Williams a difficult evaluation?
He was for me, because when you watch him run routes, he's adept as a route runner. He has good pacing to set up where he needs, what he's trying to set up to as a route runner. He has good footwork. He just has some craft to his route running, and then he can explode past you. He's a very explosive player. And then when you see him after the catch, he breaks tackles, he makes people miss. He's a determined runner who just has a good feel for traffic and open space. And you see a lot of that. You could see why a guy like Steve Smith says he reminds me of me. But I remember watching Steve Smith, and I don't remember him dropping the ball quite as much as Kyle Williams does. And, a lot, there's, when you look at a player drop the football, if it's a focus drop, it's not a big deal to me. That's just, you're too busy trying to get downfield and run. It's a concentration issue. You can get better at that. When you clap attack targets, if they're wild clap attacks, that means that maybe you're not tracking the ball fast enough, and you're not getting your hands in position where you need to. Whereas with Williams, he tends to, more often than not, he tends to open his hands slightly before clamping them on the ball, which creates a little bit of a fight of the football that can be corrected because he's getting his arms extended with his hands together to begin the target. But so that's correctable. So is the focus drops are correctable. But when he has kind of more wild clap attacks, which I see, or using his hands in a position that's not ideal to be able to catch a football with coverage on you and the ball's at a certain trajectory that you shouldn't be attacking that way, that's what concerns me. So I feel like he's one of those players that if it hits for him and he does well, he's a wide receiver 1 in fantasy for multiple years to come in a Drake May-led offense. If it doesn't work out, and this is where things have been projected to be pretty dicey from what his film looks like, maybe he's a wide receiver 3 for a year, and then you wonder if the team will move on from him. Is he the next Tyquan Thornton, or is he finally a receiver that the New England Patriots could pick on the outside who actually works out? I'd bet on him at, his ADP right now from what I've seen is like at the end of round 2. It's a little bit of a steep price, but I would consider it in some drafts, but it's a tough call. I went back and forth from putting him at the end of round 3.
That's round 2 in a rookie draft, right?
Yeah, round 2 in a rookie draft.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
I honestly, I'd much rather see him fall to the end of round 3, but I knew I couldn't put him there just because I see the upside and I know what it could look like. And there are a number of players in that end of round 3 who just don't have his upside. So, you're drafting for upside a little early with him there, but the talent's there for it to happen.
Yeah, they've had a lot of guys who haven't come through, drafted by, Elliott Wolf was there last year. But, I think with the new coaching staff coming in and new players coming in, if somebody steps up, they're going to get every opportunity, including Kyle Williams. Kaleb Johnson, running back who went to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Is he the next Najee Harris, or is he more? Is he a safe play?
Heck, I would say with that Pittsburgh line over the past few years, Najee Harris was a safe play.
I agree.
He was, he had 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, as we've talked about. That's pretty darn safe for a guy who had a crappy offensive line. Now, the Steelers' offensive line, they believe will continue to improve. It is young in a lot of spots, and I think that they're probably right about that. They've had, we've seen the Steelers have good experiences with that. And Arthur Smith can scheme run plays, and he's a good run coordinator in that sense. And he says that that Kaleb Johnson fits exactly what they want to do in that offense, and he's right, because everyone talks about him as an outside zone runner, and that's where he fits best. Well, they do that there, but also I've noticed that he ran gap plays pretty well, and Arthur Smith said the same thing. He was like, he can run gap, he can run zone, he can give you what we want. We believe he's explosive enough, he's got quick twitch, and looking at his game, honestly, I do think he's the safest running back in this class, because you've got a pretty good defense in Pittsburgh. You have a team that wants to run the ball a fair bit, and while Jalen Warren's going to take away some of the receiving option there, I think that this is a team that long term will probably be able to run the ball, and I'm just not believing that Mason Rudolph is going to be the guy, though. My buddy Steve Volk is a big Mason Rudolph fan. I think he has a poster of him up on his wall somewhere, but I'm going to have to ask one of his sons if it's hidden somewhere, like in the sock drawer or something like that. But I would say that Rudolph is probably not the one. It's going to be Aaron Rodgers, and if Rodgers is starting in Pittsburgh, that run game will be opened up a little bit more just because of the threat of him, even though there's a big chorus of people who go, Aaron Rodgers sucks, but all his teammates seem to say he really changed the way we look at football in a positive way.
Mentioned David Njoku a moment ago as tight end 13, which seems ridiculously low, unless you're super concerned about the quarterback situation, which I think we both maybe think Joe Flacco has a good shot at being the starter here. I'm not that scared. Maybe it's the presence of Harold Fannin Jr. Is he underrated, the rookie?
Yes, he is underrated based on where he's going in drafts. But I would say Njoku at wide receiver at tight end 13 is also a good value. I think that even if Harold Fannin succeeds, David Njoku will at least be tight end 13 with Flacco. But I would say, next year David Njoku's no longer under contract, so unless they re-sign him, that would be a ruinous thing for Fannin. But I don't think that's going to happen because David Njoku is a linear player. He does his best work in a straight line. And a lot of linear players aren't very good, but a high-end linear player is. And he is a high-end linear player. But you notice that what Cleveland likes to run with him are crossing routes, over routes, seam routes, corner routes, angular routes where you're not breaking back to the quarterback, where you don't need to have a really advanced route skill set or toolbox to get targets. He just uses his size, his speed, and his length to work past people running across the field. And there's some nuance there more than that, but it's not as nuanced as the other routes I mentioned. And so with Harold Fannin, though, you get a player whose receiving skills are more like Sam Laporta. Timing routes breaking back to the quarterback, routes breaking inside and outside, with a little that can win against man-to-man, and not so much zone routes that Njoku really thrives on. So he can do both. He can win the ball in the air, and then he's good after the catch, and it's not just kind of as a straight line, run me down and hold on tight type of thing that you see with Njoku. You're going to see Harold Fannin make people miss in addition to breaking tackles or getting yards after the catch. So I think Fannin, to me, is easily tight end 3 in this class. And by next year, whether he's the lead tight end in Stefanski's 2 tight end sets, or Stefanski gets canned and they end up rolling with a 1 tight end look, I still think he'll be that option, and he'll be used more as a detached option in receiving games where they use more 1 tight end stuff, and they'll just bring in a free agent, a Brock Wright type of equivalent, that you see in Detroit, who's more blocker than receiver.
Yeah, Fannin currently going as like tight end 35, total 3 square flyer play on best balls. So better probably comparison here. I'm in a ongoing regular Dynasty rookie draft. We went in round 402. Mason Taylor would at 303 was the tight end ahead of him. The tight end going after him, Elijah Arroyo at 406. So does that seem like a pretty reasonable range for him and maybe get a little upside there?
Gee, I hope so. I hope he falls to me that far in some drafts and I'll be in. But I think that's a very
Matt
good
Waldman
spot.
feeling that.
I am definitely feeling that.
I was the guy who got Arroyo at 406. So
Look at you, speedster.
Pretty happy there.
Yeah, I know.
Surprising.
Yeah, speedster. He smelled the speed and he was ready.
The cleavage was too much for me to overlook at that point. All right, Damien Martinez went to the Seahawks. Is he a stash? Feel it or fuck it?
Yeah, I think he is. I was a little worried about him because I heard some people kind of talk about the possibility that he was an off-field issue type of player. But I had some people check into that for me who I trusted and had a lot of connections. And yeah, there was the drunk driving offense that happened a couple years ago, and then he was cleared of the charges before a bowl game when he was with Oregon State. There's some of the he doesn't love football thing that you hear people say, but I remember hearing them say that about Arian Foster because he studied philosophy, and about Robert Smith because he wanted to be a med student. And I don't know, when I hear 25 to 35-year-olds assess that somebody doesn't love football, I'm a little dubious of them in terms of, do they love scouting enough to actually understand enough about life outside of football to kind of put things in perspective. I think sometimes some of these assessments are really bad. So yeah, for me, in a deep dynasty league, if you can get him, in the fourth round or later in a rookie draft, he's worth holding on to on your taxi squad for a year, seeing what happens with Kenneth Walker, who's likely to have his he's not going to likely resign in Seattle, and you might see Martinez be the kind of the Zach Charbonnet to Zach Charbonnet. And then that's worthwhile for you just from the standpoint at the end of your roster to have a player of ability who might be able to come in and take over if Charbonnet gets hurt.
Fair enough. Shedeur Sanders, we touched on the quarterback situation. Cleveland, they have 5, but we'll throw Deshaun Watson out of the picture. When you have 4 guys legitimately competing for the number 1 job, I don't know, do you really have a quarterback? Odds that Shedeur Sanders starts this year, good, feel it or fuck it?
No, but I would say, maybe a 30% chance at most. And I would say that's only because Jimmy Haslam might just be responding to media and decide that he wants to make a splash. And if the Browns are not contending and way out of it early, then they might decide, let's see what the rookie has and give him a chance. Because are they really going to give Kenny Pickett a chance to start if they're way out of it? Probably not. But if, say, Joe Flacco gets hurt or really starts to underperform, but the Browns are vying for the second place in the NFC North, they would probably go with Pickett because he's the most experienced at that point. But if the season's lost, then it becomes the Shedeur show. So, again, Bob's probably licking his chops here thinking, it's the Cleveland Browns. It's probably a 60% chance that they're not contending. So, yes, that means that it's probably more likely Shedeur's going to play 80. There you go. So, and that may be true, But
we'll see. Honestly, from a fantasy perspective, if you're not hoping it's Joe Flacco, you're probably hoping wrong because we saw what he could do in his comeback player of the year close out to the 2023 season. He can run that offense a little bit. So, would love to see him make some of the pieces in that offense relevant for us, even if the team itself is not relevant. Sorry, Cleveland Browns fans, including Matt Von Waldman. Jordan Mason, is he a buy now, working behind Aaron Jones in Minnesota?
Yeah, I think so, because I think that he's the future starter. It may not be this year, but, Aaron Jones played well last year, played very well when he was healthy. But I think that you're going to see – I don't think they're going to use him in a Chandler type of role, a Ty Chandler type of role where everyone was all excited about Chandler because he had some big yardage games on volume 2 years ago, and then they're like, oh, Aaron Jones is coming, he's not going to be all that as good as he was because he hit a certain age number, and turns out that Ty Chandler was really nothing in this offense. I think it's different with Mason. I think Mason's more of a player that they look at and go, we can start using him to give Jones more of a break, and we might have a two-headed backfield by the time it's over. And if we don't, and Jones just gets hurt, Mason can be plugged in and be really an excellent play.
Trading out of the final 3 rounds of your rookie drafts is a good idea this year. Feel it or fuck it.
Yeah, and I'm starting to think maybe it's a good idea to do, most years. Just, or at least gauge where the talent starts to get a little dicier. And then, at that point, you can, you can decide where that trade out is. But, as my buddy Alex Hanowitz says, picks don't get hurt, picks don't get suspended, picks don't lose interest in the game, and picks don't retire. And so if you look at it from that standpoint, it's kind of like investing, because if you trade your picks, to get more picks and higher picks each year, at least to some of them, you're gonna increase the picks value if you do it right pretty much every year. And then at some point you may be looking up in 2 or 3 years and you go, okay, I've got 2 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks, 3 third-round picks, and I can continue to leverage those picks for the next year for second-round picks. I can have a little more room and choices to make, and you're always in a position where you have more opportunities, whether it's to take players in this draft or to wait for the next draft.
I've had some offers this year. I have not done any of them, and I'm ending up taking those picks. I don't dislike the players I'm getting, but like every time you get from round 3 on, it feels like a total crapshoot. Round 2 probably is too, if we're being honest. So Javonte Williams would like you to know that round 1 can be as well. So as somebody who's dealing with him on roster. So yeah, I'm with you. Like, it's like the optimism of the unknown. I have these picks, they're waiting out there for me, and something great, maybe I can plug in with them, but it's not always great. So this year, I think I've ended up drafting players more. Elijah Arroyo, I hope you really come on, sir, because I did not send you off for a 2027 third rounder. So there you have that. All right, Matt, we got a giveaway. Tell the listeners what's in store for them.
Sure. It's going to be a slow month for me, or semi-slow month for me. So we've got some more giveaways courtesy of Devin Knotts. He bought some RSPs, back in December and said, hey, give some away. So we've given a few away. We give more than a few away from him. We're going to give away some more. So I want you to, if you're the first 2 people to email me at mattwaldmanrsp@gmail.com, if you're the first 2 people to email with the correct answer to this, you'll win an RSP pre-draft, post-draft subscription for 2025. And it is the running back who knocked out Ronnie Lott in a game. And I would say the one I'm thinking of actually blocked for Joe Cribbs. That's what I'll just leave that hint there. So the running back who blocked for Joe Cribbs, who knocked out Ronnie Lott on an NFL field, and he ran over his ass a couple of times on some little flat screen types of passes, leak downs, on his way to long touchdowns, and I think one of them might even be on YouTube. So there you have it.
There you have it. Matt Waldman, RSP@gmail.com is the address to send those answers to win your 2025 RSP. If you've already paid for it, maybe he'll work something out for next year. And that's it for us today.
Maybe so. We'll see.
That's it for us this week. We'll be back next week. Matt, have a great day. Love you. Goodbye.
Love you. Bye.